Picture this. You're 7 years old, standing in the marble corridors of the most magnificent palace on earth. The walls shimmer with gold leaf and precious stones that catch the morning light like captured stars. Silk carpets from distant lands cushion your bare feet, and the air carries the scent of exotic spices and perfumed oils. To any outsider, this would seem like paradise, a fairy tale come to life where you're living among unimaginable luxury and splendor. But your small hands are trembling. Your eyes dart nervously toward every shadow, every doorway, every approaching footstep, because you know what others don't, that behind these beautiful walls, children like you face horrors that would make grown men weep. You understand that this golden cage holds secrets so dark that even centuries later, historians struggle to speak of them openly. Welcome to the Ottoman Palace, where childhood innocence went to die. Before we dive into these forgotten stories that history books prefer to skip over, if you're fascinated by the hidden truths behind historical grandeur, consider hitting that like button and subscribing for more content that uncovers what really happened behind closed doors. And please, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. It's incredible that we can explore these suppressed stories together, connected across time and geography, by our shared desire to understand the complete picture of human history. What you're about to discover isn't just another tale of royal excess or political intrigue. This is the story of how an empire's appetite for power created a systematic machine that consumed children, transforming them from innocent victims into willing participants in their own exploitation. The practices we're going to examine were so normalized, so deeply embedded in Ottoman culture, that they were celebrated as sophisticated education and advancement opportunities. The Ottoman Empire, stretching from Vienna to the Persian Gulf, from the Crimean Peninsula to the gates of Morocco, represented one of history's most successful civilizations. For over 6 centuries, it dominated 3 continents, shaped global trade routes, and influenced art, architecture, and literature in ways that still resonate today. But this magnificent empire had a hunger that could never be satisfied, a need for fresh young minds and bodies to fuel its complex administrative machinery. Let's start with something that sounds almost benevolent on the surface. The devshirme system, or as it was known in palace circles, the child tribute. Every few years, Ottoman officials would sweep through Christian villages across the Balkans, through Serbia, Bulgaria, Greece, Albania, and beyond. They carried with them detailed lists and careful quotas, approaching this task with the methodical precision of tax collectors. But they weren't collecting gold or grain, they were harvesting children. Imagine being a village elder, watching these officials approach with their silk robes and calculating expressions. You know why they've come. Every family with boys between the ages of 8 and 18 feels their blood turn to ice. The officials move through your community like merchants at a market, examining the children with practiced eyes, checking their teeth, testing their reflexes, evaluating their intelligence through simple questions and tasks. They're looking for specific qualities. Beauty, yes, but also cleverness, physical strength, and something harder to define, that spark of potential that suggests a child might be molded into something useful for imperial purposes. The most promising boys are marked for selection, their names carefully recorded in leather-bound ledgers that will determine the rest of their lives. The parents of selected children are told they should feel honored. Their sons are destined for the imperial palace, where they'll receive the finest education available anywhere in the world. They'll learn multiple languages, study mathematics and astronomy, master the arts of music and poetry. Some might even rise to positions of incredible power, becoming viziers who advise the Sultan himself, or generals who command vast armies. It sounds like opportunity, like the chance of a lifetime. But there's something the officials don't mention in their recruitment speeches, something that makes mothers collapse in grief and fathers turn away in shame. These children will never return home. They will never see their families again. More importantly, they will never be the same people who were taken from those village streets. The journey to Istanbul marks the beginning of a transformation so complete, so systematic, that it amounts to the deliberate destruction of one human being and the careful construction of another. The selected boys are chained together in long lines, marching for weeks across hostile terrain under the supervision of guards who view them as valuable cargo rather than human beings. They sleep in the open when weather permits, in crude shelters when it doesn't, fed just enough to keep them alive and moving forward. During these marches, the boys begin to learn their first lessons in their new reality. Weakness is punished swiftly and publicly. Resistance is met with violence that serves as education for the others. Those who can't keep up are left behind, not out of cruelty exactly, but with the cold practicality of men who understand that only the strongest and most adaptable will survive what awaits them in the capital. By the time they reach the outskirts of Istanbul, these children have already begun to change. The weaker ones have been culled away. The survivors have learned to move quietly, speak only when necessary, and watch the guards' moods with the careful attention of prey animals studying predators. They've discovered that their old names, their native languages, their childhood memories are now dangerous luxuries that draw unwanted attention. The first sight of the imperial palace complex strikes them with awe and terror in equal measure. Topkapi Palace sprawls across 7 hills, its countless courtyards and chambers protected by massive walls that seem to stretch endlessly in every direction. The architecture speaks of power beyond imagination, minarets reaching toward heaven, domes that dwarf the grandest churches of their homelands, gates decorated with precious metals and stones that catch sunlight like frozen fire. But the boys quickly learn to see beyond the beauty to the function these walls serve. This isn't just a palace. It's a machine designed to process human beings, breaking them down into component parts and reassembling them according to imperial specifications. Every corridor has its purpose, every chamber its role in the systematic transformation of captured children into Ottoman servants. The initial sorting process determines each child's path through this machine. Imperial officials examine them with the same methodical attention they showed during the village selections, but now with access to more sophisticated evaluation techniques. They test reading abilities, mathematical skills, memory capacity, and physical coordination. They observe how each child responds to authority, handles stress, and interacts with others. Those deemed most intelligent and attractive are selected for the palace school, the Ender Run, where they'll receive the most elite education available anywhere in the empire. Others are assigned to the Janissary Corps, destined to become soldiers in the Sultan's elite military units. Still others are distributed among various palace departments, where they'll serve in capacities ranging from kitchen work to administrative duties. But regardless of their assigned path, every child faces the same fundamental requirement: the complete abandonment of their previous identity. They are given new names, typically Arabic or Turkish, rather than their original Christian appellations. They are required to convert to Islam through ceremonies that are presented as celebrations, but feel like funerals for their former selves. They are forbidden from speaking their native languages, practicing their family's customs, or maintaining any connection to their origins. The psychological impact of this forced transformation cannot be overstated. These children are experiencing what we might now recognize as systematic cultural genocide, the deliberate destruction of their ethnic, religious, and personal identities. But it's accomplished through methods so sophisticated, so carefully calibrated, that many of the victims eventually come to see it as education rather than abuse. The palace school represents the pinnacle of this system's sophistication and cruelty. Here, the most promising boys receive instruction that surpasses anything available in contemporary Europe. They study not just Turkish, Arabic, and Persian, but also mathematics, astronomy, geography, history, and law. They learn calligraphy, music, poetry, and various crafts, They receive training in administrative procedures, diplomatic protocols, and military strategy. Yet woven throughout this genuine education is something far more sinister, a careful program designed to remake these children's souls according to imperial specifications. The daily routine within the Enderun follows a rhythm designed to break down individual will while building absolute loyalty to the Sultan. The boys wake before dawn to the sound of bells echoing through marble corridors, their small bodies jolting from thin mattresses that offer little comfort against the cold stone floors. They have mere minutes to dress in their assigned uniforms, simple white robes that strip away any remaining connection to their former identities. The morning prayers are conducted in Arabic, a language most of them are still struggling to understand. They kneel in perfect rows, their young voices attempting to form words that feel foreign on their tongues, while supervisors pace between them with switches ready to correct any mistakes in pronunciation or posture. These aren't just religious observances, they're lessons in absolute submission, daily reinforcement that their new identity takes precedence over everything they once knew. Breakfast consists of simple fare: bread, olives, and watered wine served in communal halls where silence is strictly enforced. The boys learn to eat quickly and efficiently, understanding that any sign of complaint about the food or the conditions will result in punishment that extends far beyond missing a meal. They watch each other with careful eyes, already beginning to understand that survival in this place requires constant vigilance and the ability to anticipate danger before it materializes. The educational portion of their day begins with language instruction, but this isn't merely academic learning. The teachers, themselves former palace boys who have internalized the system's values, use sophisticated psychological techniques to accelerate the destruction of their students' original identities. Speaking in their native tongues results in immediate physical punishment, but more insidiously, the boys are encouraged to report each other's violations. This creates an atmosphere of mutual surveillance that makes genuine friendship dangerous and solidarity nearly impossible. As they progress through their studies, the most promising students begin to attract special attention from their instructors and the palace officials who regularly observe their classes. This attention comes with privileges: better food, more comfortable sleeping arrangements, access to books and musical instruments. But it also comes with expectations that extend far beyond academic performance. The palace operates on an economy of favor and punishment that teaches these children to view their own bodies and dignity as currencies to be traded for survival and advancement. Those who learn to please their superiors in all the ways such pleasure might be demanded find their lives becoming easier, their futures more secure. Those who resist or fail to understand the unspoken rules face increasingly harsh consequences that serve as object lessons for their classmates. The most psychologically devastating aspect of this system is how it gradually convinces its victims that their suffering is actually privilege. The boys are constantly reminded that they are receiving the finest education in the empire, that they are being prepared for positions of power and influence that would be impossible for ordinary subjects to achieve. They are told that their sacrifice, leaving behind family, faith, and identity, is a small price to pay for such extraordinary opportunities. This messaging becomes particularly powerful as the boys witness the advancement of older students who have fully embraced the system's demands. They see former palace boys returning as successful administrators, military commanders, and court officials, dressed in fine silks and commanding respect from everyone around them. These success stories serve as both inspiration and warning, proof that complete submission to the system's requirements can lead to genuine power, but also evidence of what total transformation looks like. The physical environment of the palace reinforces these lessons at every turn. The boys sleep in dormitories that house dozens of children, with no privacy and constant supervision. Their days are scheduled down to the minute, with every moment accounted for and monitored. They have no personal possessions beyond their simple uniforms, no space they can call their own, no time for private reflection or planning. Yet within this rigid structure, they begin to develop their own survival strategies and underground networks. They learn to communicate through glances and subtle gestures that escape their supervisor's notice. They develop codes and signals that allow them to share information about which officials to avoid, which behaviors earn rewards, and which punishments await those who break the unspoken rules. The older boys play a crucial role in this informal education system, passing down hard-won knowledge about navigating the palace's dangerous social landscape. But this mentorship comes with its own corrupting influence, as the older students have already been shaped by years within the system. Their advice often centers on accommodation rather than resistance, on finding ways to minimize suffering rather than challenging the fundamental injustices they all face. As months turn into years, the boys begin to lose touch with their original selves in ways that extend beyond mere cultural assimilation. They start to think in Turkish and Arabic rather than their native languages. They dream of palace corridors rather than village streets. Their prayers are offered to Allah rather than the Christian God of their childhood, not because they have genuinely converted, but because the alternative has become literally unthinkable. The palace's educational curriculum includes subjects that would be impressive in any context: advanced mathematics that surpasses what most European universities teach, astronomical knowledge that reflects the Islamic world's sophisticated understanding of celestial mechanics, poetry and literature from multiple cultural traditions. These boys genuinely do receive one of the finest educations available anywhere in their era. But this intellectual development occurs alongside moral corruption that hollows out their souls even as it expands their minds. They learn to read and write beautifully while losing the ability to recognize their own moral degradation. They master complex philosophical concepts while accepting the fundamental premise that some human beings exist solely for others' use and pleasure. The most tragic aspect of this transformation is how gradually it occurs, how imperceptibly these children cross the line from victim to participant. They begin by simply trying to survive each day, then progress to actively competing for their captor's approval, and finally arrive at a point where they can't imagine any existence outside the system that has consumed them. They become living testimonies to the human capacity for adaptation, but also to the terrible price such adaptation can exact on the soul. By their third or fourth year in the palace, these boys have become something entirely new, neither the children they once were, nor the adults they might have become under different circumstances. They are products of an institution that has perfected the art of breaking human beings down to their essential components and rebuilding them according to imperial specifications. They have been transformed into the perfect servants of a system that views human dignity as an obstacle to efficient administration and human autonomy as a threat to absolute power. The graduation ceremony that marks the end of their palace education is called the chukma, and it represents both triumph and tragedy in equal measure. These young men, for they are no longer boys, stand before imperial officials who evaluate years of careful conditioning and systematic transformation. They have mastered languages their younger selves never knew existed, absorbed knowledge that would make them scholars in any other context, and developed skills that will serve the empire's complex administrative machinery with ruthless efficiency. But look into their eyes, and you'll see something that would chill you to the bone. The spark of individual will that once animated their childhood faces has been carefully extinguished, replaced by the hollow gleam of perfect obedience. They stand at attention with postures that speak of absolute submission, their breathing synchronized, their expressions identically neutral. They have become human instruments, finely tuned to serve imperial purposes with no thought for their own desires or dreams. The ceremony itself is conducted with elaborate pomp that masks its fundamental horror. The graduating students are dressed in silk robes that mark their new status within the palace hierarchy, their heads covered with turbans that signify their complete conversion, not just to Islam, but to Ottoman identity. They recite passages from the Quran with voices that have been trained to perfect pronunciation, but the words emerge without any trace of genuine spiritual feeling. mere sounds produced by biological machinery calibrated for imperial service. As their names are called, their new names, the Turkish and Arabic appellations that have replaced their Christian origins, each young man steps forward to receive his assignment. Some will join the imperial administration as clerks and secretaries, their exceptional education making them valuable cogs in the bureaucratic machine that keeps the empire functioning. Others will be assigned to military positions, their intelligence and loyalty making them ideal candidates for command roles within the Janissary Corps. The most promising graduates receive the ultimate honor, direct service to the Sultan himself. They become pages in the inner palace, with access to chambers that even high-ranking officials never see. They pour the Sultan's wine, arrange his clothing, maintain his private quarters, and serve as living ornaments in a court obsessed with beauty and perfection. To outsiders, this represents the pinnacle of achievement within the Ottoman system, intimate service to the most powerful man on earth. Yet those who achieve this highest honor also face the system's darkest demands. The Sultan's personal pages exist in a world where their bodies belong entirely to imperial pleasure, where their dignity can be sacrificed at any moment for their master's entertainment. They learn to anticipate desires they should never have to understand, to submit to demands that would destroy ordinary minds, to smile and express gratitude for treatment that would be considered torture in any civilized context. These stories aren't just historical curiosities, they're mirrors reflecting our own capacity for normalized cruelty. The Ottoman system that consumed children behind marble walls reminds us that every civilization's golden age casts shadows we prefer not to examine. The boys who entered those palace gates as innocent children and emerged as broken instruments of imperial will deserve to be remembered, not as statistics in administrative records, but as human beings whose suffering built an empire's glory. Their ghosts still whisper through those corridors, demanding we acknowledge the true price of power and remember that behind every monument to human achievement lie countless forgotten victims whose stories we must never allow history to erase completely.